We just want to let you know that we are recording the program from this point forward. Anyone who does not want to be recorded, you may exit the program at this point. If you continue to participate in our programming here, you hereby accept our use of the recorded material on social media, including our YouTube channel. Thank you. Before
We've
we
just finished watching. Yeah, go ahead, Faisal.
before we get started, Nicole Day, you have your hand raised. Let's see. Okay, the hands is down. What about Lynn? Lynn, you have your hands raised for a reason? Lynn Siegel? Okay.
There, her hand is down. Okay.
It's back
Well,
up.
it's back up. In just a bit, we'll invite you all to come on the program if you'd like to give your comments or questions in person. We've just watched In Search of Palestine, narrated by the late Edward Said, who was a professor at Columbia University and created the chair of Palestine Studies at that university, now filled by Rashid Khaldi. His landmark work, Orientalism, really opened the West's eyes to the ways in which the West has orientalized the East or the Middle East. And this film is so fascinating because it's from 1998, and this is, of course, on just after the Oslo Accords. It's the year of the 50th Nakba. We are now in year 77, so really trademark year. And Edward Said goes into detail about the Palestinian experience as one of displacement, destruction, discrimination, and now, if he only knew that has become increasingly marked by death through the current genocide. He just takes us on a tour, including through his own memory lane with his son, and also travels across Palestine, giving us a window into what Palestinians were facing in 1998, and of course, much of which Palestinians were facing then, they are facing now, only worse. So it's a good history lesson and also wake-up call to how little has changed for Palestinians.
Krista, it's interesting to point out that Edward Said's daughter, Najla Said, has a one-person play called In Search of Palestine, named after the same title for this film. And but it's somewhat different than this film. It talks about her own personal journey and learning about Palestine and living in New York. And going to school in New York, etc. We screened. We actually.
Is there a video of that we could show?
I don't think we can show the video because we would have to get permissions, and it will be difficult to do that. I think it would be. We actually had a play. The play was performed by her at the museum in Connecticut. I would say maybe 5 or 6 years ago, but
okay.
There's nothing that would prevent us from, bringing her again to perform it one more time in Connecticut, and maybe one time in Edinburgh also, because it would be a lot.
Sure.
And so I will make an effort to contact her and see if we can bring her back. And as Krista said, if I didn't tell you when this film was made, and if it wasn't Edward Said, you'll be hard-pressed to know what year it was made. It could be made 30 years ago. It could be made 5 years ago. When they're talking about, expelling people from their land and taking things down and doing what they're doing in Hebron and all that, that's been going on for such a long time, and it has not really changed. The same story is being repeated and repeated. And one of the reasons we wanted to screen this film is we are trying to provide our followers from around the world kind of some rounded background about the history of Palestine. And by giving you bits and pieces and doses of it at a time, each dose has a certain perspective, but each one also has a certain angle. This time, we've seen Edward Said's take on Palestine and the Palestinian issues and his position on the Oslo Accords. which is quite interesting. It's in contrast to what we see positions that presented by the PA, which is the product of Oslo. And I think that is very helpful for people who are learning about Palestine to understand the significance of Oslo and the damage it has done to the Palestinians under the pretext of a peace agreement. So, with that in mind, we will welcome people who would like to join us on the panel and ask questions or comment on the film or do anything else that they might be interested in. So there are a couple of hands already there, Carol Marsh and Lynn Siegel. If you do not want to come on the panel, please take your hands down. If they stay there, I'm going to call on you to come on the panel, and you could refuse or accept. Okay. We should probably
I wanted,
the chat's
yeah, go
back
ahead.
on here.
Yeah, I was gonna ask you to do that because it looks like it's not back on. I haven't seen any
At this
new
point,
comments.
um, the chat, just keep in mind, when you type in something, if you want everybody to see it, you need to make sure it says to everyone, not just to host and panelists. Everyone is usually what you want to have, so everybody can see what you're commenting, what you're saying in the chat. All right.
I wanted to mention one thing that really jumped out at me as well. You know, there were a number of people who were interviewed in this film, including Ilan Pape, who is still with us. And at that time in 1998, they were talking about the research that was coming out of the opening of the 50 years since the Nakba archives, the Israeli archives that gave rise to new Israeli historians, which included Ilan Pape. And so he was talking about the evidence that the Palestinians did not just leave voluntarily. And of course, following that, some years later, he published his groundbreaking work, Ilan Pape, The Ethnic Cleansing of Palestine, in 2006. And so that's, of course, now a staple if you want to understand what happened in 1948. So it's just interesting to go back in time and see some of those perspectives that were just coming to the surface in terms of documenting that history and the fallacy that somehow Palestinians just walked away from their homes and land.
Okay, so anybody would like to be on the panel with us? Looks like Lynn.
I was just trying to raise my hand to get you to enable chat. And I put it in the QA, but I guess you didn't notice it. But in Boulder, we've
Thank you,
had a
Lynn.
very big deal here. Someone was arrested lately, and I think it's largely because she testified at my advice at a land use hearing at City Council. She also testified during open comment. And so this is a big deal. And I'm hoping to go meet with other colleagues at 11:45. But if we're not done by then, I might have to leave. But it's trickling down in a big way. Now, the fact that they blocked her speaking on Zoom, and she's already been suspended for city council regarding Palestine. Now on Zoom, what can you do? And then they cut off our ability to speak for our 3 minutes. Both of us, only two of us spoke on a land use issue. So, I mean, it's kind of interesting how it ties in with a land use issue of Israel-Palestine, but a local land use issue. Anyway, yeah. Concerning, very concerning. And
Thank
I'm
you,
really
Lynn.
glad about
Also
what's
for
happening
mentioning the
in England. I
Q&A
just
because
heard
I
about it, and I'm
forgot
glad
to
we have
check
some
that.
people here from the protests there.
Yeah, anyone else would like to come up and have a conversation with us regarding the film or things related to that? All right, just raise your hand if you like to do that. Thank you. We got one hand. We can start with that. Please accept the invitation if you would like to join us.
And this woman was arrested. She's she has a master's in physical chemistry from CU, like these are not, people off the street. She's Mayan, and she's been subject to Guatemalan takeover, by the United States. So she's very equipped to discuss the Palestinian issue, and it's just concerning.
Okay. Anyone else would like to join us?
While we're
Chris-
waiting for someone to come on, I can just mention also Ibrahim Abulghad, whom I've seen speak in person when I lived in Dearborn, Detroit. I just want to say, his family was from Jaffa, and he has spent his final years in Palestine in the West Bank, but he's one of very few people who requested to be buried in his original hometown of Jaffa, and his burial was allowed there. But that is absolutely unheard of in these days. I'm not sure how that even was permitted, but I think he was such a high profile person that somehow that was allowed. But as Edward Said said, for most Palestinians, your life story is, if you were displaced from your homeland, is one of being in many places and often being buried very far from Palestine. Hi, Deborah. You can go ahead and unmute yourself. Thanks for coming on and for being here today.
Hello, Krista. I put this in the chat, but I'll mention it in person. I'm reading
Sure.
Truth and Repair, How Trauma Survivors Envision Justice by Judith Lewis Herman. She's an authority on trauma and recovery in this country, at least. And I'm going to quote to you from page 14. Justice depends on the social organization of power. And then later on the same page, justice requires a moral community for its enactment. Relationships of dominance and subordination are incompatible with justice. And I think we need to keep that in mind going forward here. I'm deeply concerned about what's happening at the UN, the General Assembly meeting, whether or not they will do something worthy with Article 377, United for Peace article, and turn all of this around. Thank you.
Thank you, Deborah. Yeah, I mean, Edward Said talks about justice in this film, and even if you recognize that for the moment at least, or who knows what time frame, that Palestine or much of Palestine has been lost to the state of Israel, that the injustice of the situation is what ate away at him his whole life, and of course continues to eat away at those who have taken the time to educate themselves on this topic and see the pervasiveness of injustice when it comes to the Palestinians in the loss of their land, their lives, and their livelihood. That forced displacement for so many Palestinians. Obviously, there are Palestinians who were not displaced in 1948, but they are living under an apartheid regime. They continue to face discrimination and challenges and confiscation of their land, army raids, and the brutality of occupation. So injustice is everywhere, even within the state of Israel itself, with the 20% of Palestinians who have Israeli citizenship. So the situation, the experience of injustice is a shared experience for Palestinians, whether you're inside or outside, regardless of status. And so I appreciate you naming that key concept and the ways in which our current justice system has really failed us at the national and international level, and what a hypocrisy it has made of the very legal frameworks that were created following World War II, not only because of the Holocaust, but just to strive toward a more humane and just world. And all of that has crumbled like a house of cards. So,
Chris, I would offer this observation, whether it's accurate or not. It's where I'm seeing things at this particular moment. It seems to me that all of these structures like the UN, and we talk about the Oslo Accords even, they are created by those in power to maintain power. If you look at the structure of the UN, with which I'm quite familiar when I lived in Manhattan and spent time there, trying to, actually using Article 377, trying to prevent the illegal and immoral invasion of Iraq, the very structure of the Security Council versus the General Assembly, and then when you consider the veto, if you look at it carefully, you realize this is not intended to be justice. This is intended to maintain power.
And that's the
Where's
privilege, right, of those in
Where's
power.
the real power? Where's the real power? With the people, right, Deborah?
Well,
We'd like to think so, and yet look at how many people are standing in the streets and demanding change from their elected officials. And the change is I can't even call it incremental. It's like at a snail's pace when a snail is asleep. I mean, nothing so far substantively, if I can say that word, nothing has changed. Palestinians are still dying, by the hundreds. Every single day there are bombings, and it's outrageous. And of course, the silent encroachment on Palestinian land and livelihood across the West Bank happening in the background, because who's really covering that story? It's But thank you for naming that, Lynn. I know there's power in the people and there are power in numbers, and we've seen historic changes when people have come together and spoken out in unison. But we seem to be living in a different world where the powers that be have the privilege of also ignoring what the people are saying, and also ignoring their own principles that they have upheld for decades in this post-World War II landscape that we live in.
you with all due respect, Lynn, power to the people, many people that I love and respect have a tendency to feel that that's a valid approach. And I'm always startled to think about Robert Richter's documentary film of all of the people who filled Manhattan on the east side from 42nd Street, from the river over, up and through all of Central Park. You can see the aerial view, millions of people against atomic energy and atomic bombs. And look where we are today. Even Obama had our atomic arsenal modernized. So, I don't think we should stop trying, but I'm not sure that's where this core of the issue is. I think we have to change structures and processes to have true justice.
Well, maybe both simultaneously. And I appreciate this very much because my mother died from inhaling plutonium from an atomic weapon trigger plant nearby here in Boulder in 1957, and she died in 1969, the exact year of the second biggest fire. 57 was the first at Rocky Flats. And she died of acute myelocytic leukemia, which reminded me that Edward Said had my leukemia, right?
Yes, right.
And does anyone know about the details of that?
No.
Like, huh?
I'm not sure if there's ever been, I mean, it's something anyone could look into, I
I mean,
suppose.
the lawyer I've dealt with locally in the prosecuting attorney, effectively against me in my suspension regarding these things. His father is a blood oncologist. Those are the people that do the study of the immune deficiency disorder of leukemia, ironically. But and he's very sympathetic to my cause, but of course he's a prosecutor against me. He's forced to represent the city against me. I was suspended for a month actually from the council chambers, and that's fine. Even though my suspension is up, I'm going to appeal it at court anyway. So it's getting really concerning here in Boulder anyway. I mean,
and Lynn,
had,
part of what you're talking about is having the courage to stand up, speak out, take risks, make sacrifices. And that's something that when you talk about the power of the people, that is what we have seen historically when people have been willing to make tremendous sacrifices in their reputation or their job security or their personal situation sometimes. We've had change. And another element of this, of course, is to affect the bottom line. And that's, I think, part of what the whole BDS movement is trying to address is making it just too expensive for the world to maintain and normalize apartheid, genocide, colonization, the ways in which the global South has been subjugated or continues to be subjugated. And so,
Uh,
these are all pieces of that puzzle when you
Krista,
talk
could
about.
you have Justine just joined us. Justine, can you unmute yourself and turn your video on, please?
Okay,
Hi, Justine. Welcome to the program.
thank you, thank you. Hello,
You
everybody.
adjust your camera so we can see you.
Okay, I'm trying here.
There you go.
I just wanted to comment on what Deborah said. I don't know, I was also in 2003, I was with a comrade of mine. We were co-chairs of the International Committee of the Green Party of the United States. And we had a meeting with Jan Kavan, who was the UNGA president at the time. He was from Czechoslovakia. And we went to urge for Uniting for Peace also. And while we were there, for an hour, there must have been 10, 12 phone calls. And what Jan said was, we need just one country to activate or call for Uniting for Peace to get it moving. And he said all of those calls are from mainly, not all, but from Arab countries or from the global South who are saying or asking, has anyone called? Has anyone called for Uniting for Peace? And he would say, well, why don't you? And they would say, well, we can't because the United States will, really harm us in terms of aid or whatever. However, I have a lot more hope now that there seems to be a movement that many countries are on board and that this will happen. I'm hoping it will happen and that a UN protection force will be part of a resolution if the UNGA can do that. Because once they do, then it cannot be overridden by the UN Security Council. So I think all of us to work towards that, to be in New York, perhaps on September 17th, 18th, to push for someone to speak when the ICJ opinion in July of 19 was passed saying that Israel was not sovereign, they had to get out of the occupied territories. There was a resolution of 124 countries saying that they approved of this and wanted the actions that the ICJ had taken to be carried out. So I don't know what will happen, but I urge people to have optimism and to push everyone to think about this and to write to legislatures. It has some hope for stopping the genocide. And finally, seeing the film was very moving to me. I was in the Sabeel conference when Said spoke. He was so moving. And the moving thing was there were so many crowds of Palestinians in Bethlehem outside of the auditorium because there was no room for them. And they had speakers everywhere and people just hung on every word. And he was so moving and supportive and built their spirits up to go on in a horrible situation. So that's all I had to say.
Deborah, you want to say something? Go ahead. Unmute yourself, please.
I'm going to sign off.
Yes. Justine, actually, I met Jan Kavan, and we had a statement for the General Assembly that was translated into Spanish and French, and we had a packet, and we had 150 NGOs. Edward Said signed on to our effort, as did Noam Chomsky and several other people of note. What I learned was that the US, threatens other countries in every way possible in order to persuade them not to do what is the right thing. I'm very hopeful that this will not work this time. As you are, I do hope that the right thing will happen. I think some of the smaller countries are learning that that they can oppose the U.S. and still remain safe, I guess is the word I would use. Anyway, I'm hopeful too. Thank you.
Good, good. Thank you. Yeah,
Thank you, Deborah.
yeah. I'm going to sign off. Thank you.
And then we have a new panelist joining here in a moment. Let's see. Please, and there's another one here.
Faisal, if you close those windows, then it's our audience will see
Yes, I got it.
those speaking.
We just, people can change their views.
Hi,
I mean, for those who are no longer speaking,
Yeah.
Deborah, I think she signed
Yeah, go
off. And
ahead.
Steve.
sorry, I'm in the car. I really wanted to keep listening, but I had to go somewhere that closes at 2 o'clock. But one of the things that just occurred to me when listening to Justine and also Deborah was that I wonder if the U.S. cutting off of so much foreign aid will liberate some of the countries who may have been concerned about speaking out for loss of those billions of dollars, which now they've lost anyway. I think the other thing, of course, is the control we have of countries by our military aid and defense spending, like for instance in Egypt, which gets only second to Israel in the amount of aid. And that, of course, is another way that we control like Jordan and Israel. I mean, sorry, Jordan and Egypt and now Lebanon. Anyway, that's kind of my comment. Yeah, I wonder if things will change now.
We have Rajai Atalla with us. Rajai, do you want to turn your video on and unmute yourself, please?
Yes, good morning. My reflection is perhaps as a native of Jerusalem and someone who studied the history of the Holy Land. It seems to me we have recovered from the era of European colonialism. American colonialism is fading. It may take time, but I am reminded of the history of the 11th century when Western Christendom recovered the Holy Land or Jerusalem from, excuse me, from the Islamic world, and in due course, the Salah ad-Din recovered that from the Crusaders. It took time, but it seems to me inevitably the power of the United States relative to the rest of the world is going to decline. I don't expect to live to see it, but Jerusalem has never been fully dominated by the Western world in the past, and I don't think it will long term. I think the reality is that one might think of Israel as perhaps an American colony populated by or managed by American Jews and financed more than any of the states in the United States. So, as I say, in due course, it'll take a generation or two, but I think eventually Jerusalem will go back to being available to Christians, Muslims, and Jews as it was historically under Islamic requirement, because one of the things in the West that is not recognized is that Islam recognizes Christians and Jews as the people of the book. One never hears that in the Western media.
Thank you, Rajai. Yeah, you know, talking about that long view of history and how the power dynamics have changed on the ground in Palestine over centuries
Yes,
is,
yes.
you know, is in one sense it, you know, that's part of what gives people hope that, you know, this current empire, if you will, cannot last forever. At the same time, that's met with the current sense of urgency that, You
Yes.
know, who
Yes,
wants to
I
wait
understand.
hundreds of years for justice? We want justice now. And
Yeah,
so there's always that,
Well,
but I think it's important they go hand in hand, right? We know that we have a sense of urgency, and also that change is in some respects inevitable. But
yes.
we can, as Ilan Pape often says, we can quicken the change if we stand up for justice. So thank you for
Uh,
mentioning that.
Yeah, my father had a close friend who wrote a book about the history of Jerusalem, beginning when the Jebusites built it 5,000 years ago. And he had a 30-page chronology in the front. I went through that one time. The longest period of peace in Jerusalem in 5,000 years was 30 years. And
Wow.
it has not changed in my lifetime. So I'm
Yeah.
hoping that in the future it will be peaceful again.
Inshallah.
Well, isn't it? I mean, I think that politically we won't have to wait centuries or hundreds of years. I think that, you know, same thing, right? Because it's happening already in our Congress. I think that this support, the US supporting Israel, there's certainly a wake-up call in the money, you know, the robbery of our treasury, and also the loss of our moral compass if we ever really had one. I'm beginning to sort of doubt that, or at least, you know, it was a myth, maybe perhaps more than the reality. And now the veil has been, you know, lifted, and we're all seeing how America operates in the world, and it's a huge disillusionment, I think, for many people. It's a huge wake-up call.
Well, if I may
Yeah,
interject,
yeah, go ahead, Josai.
a perspective I borrow from the Dalai Lama, who said the Western women will save the race. The reality is that the women in Western governments, their numbers are increasing very significantly. I remember in the late 1990s, they had 3 or 4 women in the Senate. Now they have, I think, between 25 and 30. Eventually, I think the women, when they prevail, as in the old indigenous tribes in the United States, the elder grandmothers, they will not so easily send their sons to fight wars. And the warrior mentality which prevails among the macho men who control the government in Washington will fade, I hope, in favor of the what I regard as the wisdom of the grandmothers. My maternal grandmother smuggled her 3 oldest sons out of Palestine to avoid conscription by the Ottoman Turks. And they came to this country and she never saw them again, and she knew that would happen. But she had the courage to do that. So I'm hoping that this will come to pass. It may take another generation or two, but hopefully it will happen. But I genuinely believe that the generations as they come, all we need is another generation or two in the Arab world or the Islamic world, and they will be able to match the West weapon for weapon. And as happened with Salah ad-Din in the 11th century, he gathered his troops and he spent 10 years preparing for it, but he eventually kicked out the Crusades. And when he kicked out the Crusaders from Jerusalem, he allowed the Christians who wanted to stay to stay. Whereas when the Crusaders came in, they slaughtered everybody. They were proud of the fact that their horses were knee deep in blood. So it's crazy. But
Are you saying, you said 2 things? One, you said, which I agree with, I don't think women are so eager to send off or to see others being slaughtered. We are not the warmongers of the bunch. That's the men for sure. So more women in power hopefully will lead to a more peaceful and diplomatic world with more compassion than what we've been seeing. But it also sounded like you said maybe that other supporters, that there'll be a balance of power, and militarily, may perhaps even in the Arab world, who so far have not really come to the aid of the Palestinians, for instance, except for the Yemenis, who are, you know, seriously outgunned.
Well, I mean, part of what Israel is doing now in Gaza is to intimidate the Arab world. And the Saudi Arabia has the best the U.S. will provide, but it's nowhere near enough to match what Israel has. Between Israel and Saudi Arabia, Saudi Arabia would be demolished. And so And this is a way of telling the whole Islamic world what we'll do to you if you. This is why they took on Iran. You know, but
Well,
I
we
think
see the way these Arab regimes are still under the control, really, of the United States and other Western powers in terms of,
yes,
being pulled
yes,
into this sphere of influence and not speaking out against what's happening to Palestinians. So that's a legacy
yes,
of colonialism that persists to this day.
yes, I agree with you. But it was China who negotiated the peace between Saudi Arabia and Iran. And China and India are going to have more influence in the Islamic world in the future, I believe.
Right, and we see that already, the way
Yeah.
they've stepped up and reminded us all that the US is not the hegemony that it
Yes,
professes to be.
yes, I
Yeah.
think.
But I want to make one comment about the women, because one of our attendees has already pointed out Hillary Clinton, but we have had Margaret Thatcher's and Golda Meir's, and yes, Hillary
that's
Clinton.
true.
So let's not be too romanticize what women can do in power, but it is very true, I would say, especially in indigenous cultures, the way women have stepped up and stepped forward. And not just in indigenous cultures, but certainly in terms of looking more towards understanding and reconciliation. And, there is something to be said for that. But we have to be careful not to over romanticize what it means to be, what men stand for and what women stand for. But we do know that historically, yes, wars are fought by men. Many men have often been the ones in the room drawing the war plans. And so that there is a great truth to that, for sure.
Well, women in power, of course, are rewarded for adopting the ethos of the dominant male
Of course.
leadership perspective. So, I don't know that, but I still think the average woman, the voters and the populace are not going to want to send their children to be slaughtered or to see others slaughtered nearly as indifferently as men in power seem to be. Anyway, and thank you so much for letting me jump in, and I'll jump off.
Thank you, Cindy. And there's also, if we look at Israeli polls, the majority of Israeli society supports what's happening in Gaza. And with that comes the putting their sons and daughters, for that matter, in harm's way by sending them into the IDF and putting them on the front lines. So, some of this is cultural, some of it is circumstantial. They think they're justified and in the slaughter, and that's part of the problem, right?
Yeah. Well, in Israel, they teach their children that the Arabs want to kill them, and they claim the Palestinians.
So it's all
they claim that the Palestinians teach their children to kill the Jews, which is not true. Because I spent all of my life in the Arab world, and my classmates in Cairo when I was a refugee, 1/3 of them were Jewish, and I never heard anybody say they want to kill all the Jews. But in Israel, they brainwashed the kids when they were young, tell them all of the Arabs want to kill you.
That's true. And many films and even individuals have spoken to that, the upbringing in the Jewish community, regardless of where, the summer camps, what people are taught, and how they're the eternal victims, right? And the world is against you, and you are justified in defending yourself, even if it means the slaughter of others. So, but one thing that Palestinians again and again emphasize, if you just bother to ask people, is kind of what you were saying, like when the Palestinians talk about the fact that Jews, Christians, and Muslims lived together in what some people refer to as the Holy Land, in historic Palestine, and it was Zionism that destroyed that harmony of living together, because it redefined the space of Palestine as a Jewish state, and that's something we have to. And that's the problem with Zionism in its current form, is that it is privileging one group over others, and anytime you have that, you're going to have injustice, and that's where we are now.
Yeah, one of the things that to this day amazes me is that no one has suggested, I mean, in this country, people speak of ecumenical movements with different denominations getting together sometimes, or even people, Muslims and Christians and Jews getting together. No one has ever spoken of having the sophisticated or decent senior clergy in the Jewish community and in the Islamic community talk about the southeast corner of the old city, where the Dome of the Rock and Al-Aqsa Mosque sit on the place that used to be the temple. Because I remember when I took my wife there to visit the first time, after we visited Al-Aqsa Mosque, he took us down to the Solomon's Stables, which underlie both of them. And of course, the western wall of that is the western wall of the old temple. And
Yes.
they need to figure out a way of accommodating, allowing maybe the Muslims to pray there on Friday, the Jews to pray there on Saturday. Work out something decent. Get people, senior clerics in the Islamic world and in the Jewish world, to talk together here in the West, where people very often discuss ecumenical, associations, if you will. And but all of the time I've been here, I've never heard anybody suggest any. They talk about the right-wing people wanting to remove the Al-Aqsa Mosque and build a new temple, which doesn't make sense.
Yeah, they have actually the architectural plans for the third temple.
Yeah,
And there's an organization that is currently planning the destruction so that they can rebuild the third temple. The irony is that the western wall of the original temple, the second temple, in front of that, where Jews go to walk up to that wall and pray, that entire area after 67 was cleared. It was the Moroccan quarter. And that was completely demolished, and people were forced out of their homes and off their land in order to make room for this incredible plaza that you walk up to when you go to the Western Wall. And so, you know, you asked, how can we make room for, you know, people to be able to pray and follow their traditions in these holy places, but certainly not by destroying
Sure.
the
I agree,
third
not by
most holy
destroying.
site in Islam. So, you know, you can't even have the conversation until there's a different power differential, because as long as Israel calls all the shots and has all the power and influence in making these decisions, then there's not going to be a just outcome.
Now, what I'm suggesting is senior clerics, Islamic clerics, and Jewish clerics in this country, in the Western world, they should be able to get together and talk about it, because this is where the ecumenical movement started among Christians after the Vatican Council, Pope John the 23rd opened the possibility for Catholics to enter into dialogue with other Christian communities, and since then it's been a transformation in the spiritual tradition here in the West. But I don't hear any of it. And historically, as I say, you know, the Islamic countries have respected the churches. They were never bothered. Israel takes over and they start demolishing mosques, and they demolish some churches too. So.
Exactly, yeah. And so that sense of respect and coexistence needs to be uplifted, and certainly shared in wider circles, particularly in the Christian communities, these Christian Zionist communities that, you know, are somehow partnering with the state of Israel in a way that is, you know, almost perverse in its in what people are, what's bringing them together in the first place is a story, a narrative of prophecy that actually does not respect each other at all fundamentally. And so
unfortunately, I think in the Christian tradition, the Western Christian tradition, in the Protestant, there's so much emphasis on the Old Testament, and they ignore the fact that there's some of it in there that is barbaric. And Netanyahu was quoting that, you know, in the old days when Yahweh was their God of war, he used to tell them to go out and the pagan people kill the babies, kill the elders, kill everybody. And now he recently, in his orders about Gaza, he was quoting the part of the Old Testament that says that the God tells them to go to kill everyone. So it's they don't mention it here in the media in this country, but that's what he was doing.
Well, and the irony is you know, most of the early Zionists were secular. This was an ideological movement to secure a Jewish presence in in Palestine. And, Israeli leaders evoke these biblical stories in order to bring people, rally, as almost as a rally cry. And I don't think they're said in earnest. I think they're used to manipulate people at an emotional level.
Yes.
And instead of appealing to people's sense of reason and fairness and justice, and that's really what's wrong with using those stories in that way.
I still remember that at the funeral of Ishaq Rabin, his granddaughter, when she got up there, she was speaking again and again of the God of Israel, as though he belonged to Israel alone, and which is to me very offensive. But there's still that is accepted among them.
Right. Yeah, there is that sense of, I mean, that's why the whole sense of having an exclusive Jewish ethno-national state is offensive. It's offensive to all of the other peoples and traditions who have ties to that place, and in particular, those who have inhabited the land, loved the land, worked the land for centuries, which are the Palestinians, and completely ignored and disrespected. So hopefully we can get to a better place. So far, where things are going in the opposite direction. It's the tragedy of our times, but also, Palestine, what's happening in Palestine is kind of a mirror to us all of what can be normalized. And I think it's a challenge of where do we really stand as human beings, not as Jews or Palestinians or Americans or Europeans, but as human beings, where do we stand? And how do we show respect for humanity? And I think what's happening in Gaza in particular, and in Palestine in general for the last decades is an incredibly powerful mirror of a more, to regroup and reestablish our moral compass as human beings.
I grew up in Jerusalem. I could eat the grapes and tell you whether they were grown in Ramallah or in.
There you go.
In
I know there's the Khalili grapes and everybody has their specialty, and it's true.
The oranges were from
soil.
Jericho or Jaffa. So
That's right.
it was a very highly sophisticated culture, agricultural culture, all wiped out now.
And you see, because you're talking about grapes, you're talking about oranges, and you can look at fakus or other agricultural products that are beledi, that have almost like what we might call in the West heirloom varieties of but that is all tied to the land. And even if you grew up in a city, you have that sense of connection to the land as a Palestinian. And that is it's passed down from generation to generation. And it's part of Palestinian identity. And that's why there is nowhere else for the Palestinians to be other than their homeland.
Yes, I agree. I took our sons to be baptized in Gethsemane because their father is buried in my father is buried in the garden of the church in Gethsemane. So
yeah,
I was talking to one of the panelists. My wife is asking me what you're
talking.
Okay.
So I wonder, Rajai, if you tell us more about your family history, because it's not every day that we have, an elder, with all due respect, an elder among us who can share stories from the old days. And if there's anything else you want to share, that I think it's just a privilege to have you on the panel today.
Well, thank you. You're very kind. Are you in Madison?
Yes, I am.
I'm in Madison also.
You're in Madison?
Yes.
Is that right? Okay, well, it sounds like we need to have coffee then.
Yes. So it's no, I
can send you my contact information, and if you look, do you have the chat open?
Well, I'm not really familiar with these things here.
At the bottom of the screen, there's 3 dots. If you click on the 3 dots, it's something called chat, and I can send you a message that way.
It says chat. Oh yeah, here it is. Yeah, okay.
So I'm going to send you my contact information. If you just jot it down, then you can reach out to me at your leisure. How about that? Give me just a second to type it in.
Yeah.
And that's part of the beauty, right, of us coming together. So tell me if
Krista.
you got that message in the
We
chat.
have 2
Yeah.
minutes, 2 minutes to close down.
Oh,
Okay, yeah, we're
okay.
gonna finish up because we have another program there in Scotland today. Did you
Okay,
receive the
okay,
information?
Okay, can I just give you my phone number and you can text me?
Yeah, that would be even better. You do
It's
that. That's
608
easier.
608
Okay.
772 1123. 772
Excellent.
1123.
Got it. All right. Thank
Okay.
you. And thank you
Okay,
everyone for
thank you,
joining today and
everyone.
being in conversation. We really appreciate your
Yeah.
attendance and wonderful conversation today. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks,
you.
everyone, for joining us today. Thank you, Krista, for co-hosting, and we look forward to seeing you next week. Take care, everyone. Tomorrow,
Okay.
we recommend that you join the Doctors Against Genocide panel for discussions with doctors who are actually in Gaza. See you all
There's
later.
the link for that in the chat. If you can just click on it, you'll be able to register for those special panels on Sundays.
Okay.
I'll give you 1 second to do that. And okay. Assalamu, everyone.
Okay. Ma salama. Thanks, everyone.
Bye.